Disclaimer: this video does not intend to endorse any particular religion or even irreligiousness. It simply explores the essence of sexuality in Abrahamic religious philosophy. Why does God dislike sex? The punishment for adultery in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam is stoning to death. While Islam gets vilified a lot, with stoning portrayed in the media to be a punishment associated mostly with this particular religion, it has traditionally been part of all Abrahamic religions and is not exclusive to Islam at all. The question, however, remains as to why sexual union is so serious in Abrahamic religious philosophy. Is there rational reasoning behind this position? While most Muslim alim or wise men and many learned scholars of Christianity and Judaism try to obstinately propose the social impact of wanton sexual behavior, as is prevalent in predominantly the Western world today, as the principal reason behind such a punishment, it does not even begin to justify the rather gruesome and gory violence that is inflicted on the condemned individual during stoning. With the advent of different modes of protection, the unwanted consequences of lecherous sexuality, such as conception and transmission of sexual diseases, can largely be completely avoided. A lot of sex is indeed had in this world now without any visible consequences at all. If there is no pregnancy, is it plausible to inflict such a punishment on someone who just had sex which perhaps lasted a few minutes? Risking digression, it could be mentioned here briefly that the Quran actually prescribes public flogging and not stoning as the punishment for adultery. The punishment of stoning for adultery is actually not there in the Quran at all. However, we will concentrate solely on the Quran's view of sexuality in this particular video and not focus on the legal aspects. We will post a separate explanatory video on the laws relating to sexual perversion. Just what does the Quran say about sexuality? We investigate chapter 23 of the book, which begins giving a list of characteristics one finds in those who are to inherit the eternal abode of heaven. These characteristics include being attentive in salute, avoidance of pointless conversations, etc. Relevant to our discussion is only one of the qualities, and that is that they do not have sex except with certain people. This particular quality pertaining to sexuality has been discussed in detail by the Quranic standards. It has been given a bit of explanatory attention, which is uncommon for a book which is most remarkably terse and concise. Let us study this in detail. The first sentence says, "Those who abstain from sex." And the speaker pauses here and then begins a new verse, a new sentence. "Except with those joined to them in marriage bond, or the captives whom their right hands possess, for in their case they are free from blame." The prevalent interpretation is to ignore the fact that the statement has been split into two sentences. It is assumed that this simply means you cannot have sex except with your wives and those your right hands possess. The latter term we will endeavor to explain in a separate video. While there is quite a bit of obscurity in this verse, it has quite a bit that is very clear and doubtless. There is a very meaningful pause at the end of the 5th verse. It affects the sense of communication significantly. It is as if a father is saying to his son, "You should have no more chocolates," and then pausing to add, "But if you have one in the morning, I will not blame you." The phrasing of the message is quite clear in its disapproval of the general consumption of chocolates overall, with there being an exemption in a certain case. It seems there is general disapproval of sexuality, with a certain exemption granted in case of spouses and some other individuals. Sexuality is regarded to be so despicable an act that you actually are required to take a bath to purify yourself following intercourse. Even if you are not actually dirty, And this is directly there in the Quran and is not merely a practice of Prophet Muhammad. In chapter 57, verse 27, God explains how the Christians actually imposed monasticism on themselves, and it was not anything he himself decreed. He also states that the intention was noble, but they had not been able to respect the promises of perpetual abstinence. With all the horrifying stories of abuse emerging from investigation of churches, one can only confirm this. However, this particular verse actually confirms something else, and that God indeed does not think highly of sexual intercourse, and he generally liked the idea of monasticism. This explains why he severely reprimands those engaging in homosexual and other activities. Since even heterosexual behavior is permitted only under severely restricted circumstances and regulations, it is an abysmal display of effrontery to God to engage in homosexual behavior. God simply does not like sex. As he states in chapter 118, anyone who seeks beyond this are indeed transgressors. To be able to answer the question as to why he might dislike sex, we have to study the anthropological history that the Abrahamic religions detail before us. It appears that God dislikes every single quality that belongs to animals. This includes eating, defecation, urination, sexual union, and injustice. Injustice and cruelty fundamentally characterize the animal kingdom. A strong dog can take away the food from a weak one callously. Among us, though, the practice of injustice is not permissible according to the universally perceived moral code of human behavior. Even though cruelty and barbarism are widespread in the animal kingdom, it is abhorred among the humans. Persecution of the weak by the strong is considered a crime. Similarly, in Islamic tradition, you must purify yourself again if you defecate or urinate or even pass gas. They are considered actions which spoil a purified state. In other words, anything animalistic is considered either completely unacceptable or at least impure. The biblical story of the creation of man is quite pertinent in this regard. The Quran does generally support this narrative, but some key facts, generally taken for granted, are not actually mentioned literally. For example, it is assumed that Adam and Eve were created somewhere else and then sent to earth. The Quran does not say this explicitly anywhere. The Arabic word used to describe their dwelling place is Jannah, which is literally a garden in Arabic. God says to the angels that he would like to appoint humans his representatives on planet Earth. This is curious because it sounds as if the humans were already in existence when this conversation took place. The angels protest, saying they would engage in violence and bloodshed if they were chosen. This corresponds accurately with the caveman phase of our evolutionary history. The angels simply were incredulous that this violent, barbaric animal could be appointed to be the divine representatives. But then, God breathes his own soul into Adam, and then he was able to name all things. It seems, according to the Quran, at some point in our evolutionary history, we were given a divine gift, which is not merely biological, setting us apart from the rest of the animal kingdom. It is well known in the field of evolutionary biology that even though evolution seems to be completely convincing and true, why the humans are so unfathomably different from other species is a question that remains unanswered. The Quran claims that it is the soul or the ruh that is behind this difference. The biblical and Quranic narratives state that the insertion of the ruh generates divine qualities in human beings. such as a sense of justice and beauty, happiness, sadness, sorrow, euphoria, truthfulness, cleanliness, orderliness, etc., to name a few. Since no other species has the ruh, they are not able to exhibit such behavior. One of the most important qualities is that of curiosity. Humans are intensely curious, and animals are not. Animals are claimed to be programmed, sophisticated biochemical robots. That, rather interestingly, justifies their slaughter and consumption in Abrahamic religions, since there is nothing wrong with killing robots. Since the humans have the ruh, it behooves them to behave just as God Himself would. Since they are the representatives, they're expected to be perfectly truthful, honorable, and just in their lives and dealings with each other. It seems from the biblical narrative that humans possessed a great deal of fur when they were initially given the ruh, living in a blissful garden. They were forbidden to consume a particular tree's fruit, which they did, resulting in great loss of hair, which eventually exposed their genitalia. It seems from the story that the insertion of the ruh had created such a strong effect on the erstwhile animals that they completely forgot their animal identity until it was exposed to them again. The realization then dawned upon them that they were no different from the other animals roaming around, generating a great sense of embarrassment in them. They might have possibly experienced extreme arousal following the consumption of this fruit. They tried to cover their nakedness using leaves. This legacy has been passed on. We still cover our nakedness using clothes and are urged to not expose our physical charms blatantly for sexual purposes. This also explains why a modest dress code is strongly prescribed in all Abrahamic religions and not just Islam. It is because we are expected to do things differently from the animals. Generally speaking, any behavioral trait resembling those of animals is considered unpleasant. Even though the reality is that we have an animal body, we are advised to suppress this by wearing clothes to hide our nakedness, by using perfume to conceal our naturally unpleasant odor, etc. We are advised to renounce anything that is vulgar and obscene for the same reason.